Today's daf is Samach Aleph, and we will begin with the question, or really the machlokas. You had the statement of Rabbi Tzvi that said that if you measure from your city 2,000 amma, and that includes the entirety of another city, so the entirety of the other city is only going to count as 4 amos, and as such, you're allowed to continue beyond that city, just minimizing the 4 amos. Whereas if you measured, and that in that measurement it ends up that you're within the boundary of that city, then you can only count. The 2,000 amma into where you get to within that city, and this is an interesting concept, because over here where you count and the entirety of the city is within the 2,000 amma, so then you get, so let's say there's 1,000 amma between one city and the other city, the larger city and the smaller city, there's 1,000 amma. Then the next city is 1,000 amma, so you can get your 2,000 amma entirely encompass or beyond the smaller city. So the entirety of this city is only going to count as 4 amma, and you have another 996 beyond. Whereas if you count from the smaller city, your 2,000 amma is going to end within the confines of the city. Then you cannot count it as 4 amos, and you have to end within the city. And to that, Rav Tzvi said, this is only prophecy, meaning it doesn't seem to have a logic. It seems like this is the halacha and we have to accept it, but it doesn't explain as to why it is. So it's like prophecy. Because he said, Mali kolsa b'chatzia ir, Mali kolsa b'sefer. What difference does it make that your 2,000 amma encompass the other city, and therefore it's going to count as 4 amma, whereas it ended in the midst of a city and it counts only as the actual amos that are worked. Amar Rava Tavaya Taninu. Rava says, even though that you don't have an explanation, but they both are actually in the brisa. Anshe ir gedola mehalchenes kala ir katana. The people of the larger city, which is wider than 1,000 amma, can travel throughout the entirety of the smaller city. Ve'ein anshe ir katana, but the people of the smaller city cannot travel through ve'ein anshe ir katana ma'alchen es kol ir gedola. They cannot go through the entirety of the larger city. My time. So what's the reason for this? Wouldn't you say that the distinction between the smaller city and the larger city is on the basis of this idea that we were that Rav Tzvi was just saying, and that there's a distinction between whether it ended in the midst of the city, so the people from the smaller village cannot go through the entirety of the larger city because their 2,000 amma ends in the midst of the city and they can't continue beyond. Whereas the larger city can travel through the entirety of the small city because it's within the 2,000 amma. And then we are going to say that the entirety of the city counts as 4 amma. Rav Tzvi. So Rav Tzvi, why is he saying that this is such a surprising halacha? After all, we have a brisa seems to say it. Anshi Tani. He actually learns that both can travel. The people of the small city and the people of the large city can each travel in the entirety of the other city, since there's only 1,000 amma between the two. And he says, actually, what's going on here is that it wasn't that you were living at home for Shabbos, Because if you were living at home for Shabbos, you're measuring from your hometown 2,000 amma, and wherever that ends, it ends regardless of whether it's in a city, regardless of whether it encompasses the entirety of the next city. It's always going to be wherever 2,000 amma ends, that's where you go. However, this case is talking about this brisa that said that the people of the smaller city and the people of the larger city can go from one to the other, and the entirety of the other city is where someone living in the larger city put an eruv in the smaller city and made that his dwelling place for Shabbos. But his real dwelling place is in the larger city. That's what it means. He can go through the entirety of the larger city, and vice versa as well. Someone from the small city puts an eruv in the larger city, he can go through from one to the other. That's called a nosein. He put an eruv in the other city to make that his dwelling for Shabbos. Aval moded, but somebody who's actually just measuring from his hometown, from the border of his own town, 2,000 amma, doesn't make a difference which way it goes it encompasses the entirety of the next village or not. You can only go to wherever the line ends. And he doesn't say a city's ever going to be like 4 amos in regards to measuring from your own city. The next city is never going to count as 4 amos. That's not what we're learning about. Veloy, really, there's no such thing that says that when you measure from your place to the next space, the next city is going to count all as 4 amos. We are on 61a, 4 lines from the top, 5 lines from the top. Amoded lo, but Tanan, what we learned the halacha is, this that we said that someone is measuring from his place to 2,000 amma. We give him 2,000 amma. And even if his 2,000 amma ends in a ma'ara, in a cave, so that is the measure that he's going to have 2,000 amma. Even when he's measuring, he's going to get 2,000 amma in the midst of a cave. That's where it's going to end. So we see that wherever we see that we have a brisa actually about, or we have a mishnah really about somebody whose 2,000 amma ends in the middle of a city. So to that, the Gemara says, you're right. Of course, that part he agrees with Rav Idi, that if you measure 2,000 amma and it ends in the midst of a city, that you don't have the entirety of the city. You only, wherever it ended is where you can go until. However, Rav Idi is challenging the idea of the idea that if it goes beyond the city, the 2,000 amma encompasses the entirety of the city, then now the city only counts as 4 amma, and you have another another measure beyond the city. So in our example, there was 1,000 amma between your hometown and this village, and the village itself is 1,000 amma. So your 2,000 amma goes beyond. Now, instead of ending right at the other side of the city, of the small village, you're actually going to get another 996 amma, because the entirety of the village only counts as 4 amma. That concept, he said, is prophecy. It has no logic, and to that he says there is no Mishnah or Brisa that concurs with that. Sofer irit tzricha deloy tunan, because that's not in a Mishnah. Amar Nachman. So Nachman said, "Man tana the tani anshi le mishtavish." The one who says that the people of the small city can carry throughout the entirety of the larger city, as well as the people of the larger city can carry through the entirety of the smaller city, is not mistaken. Uman the tani ein anshe. And the one who says that the people of the smaller city cannot carry throughout the entirety of the larger city, also lemishtavish, are also not making a mistake. So even though we had a text in the Brisa that said the people of the larger city can carry through the entirety of the smaller city, and the people of the smaller city cannot carry through the entirety of the larger city, and Rav Idi changed that and said actually or had the different text and said both can carry through the entirety of the other city. So these are not mistaken. They're just talking about two different scenarios. Mandatoni and Shile Mishtabish, the one who says that the people of the smaller city can also carry through the entirety of the larger city. The Malkim Labanosim, as Ravidi explained, that's talking about where he took an eruv, he took a piece of bread, and he made himself his Shabbos space in the other city, so he can carry throughout that city. Uman the Tani Ein Anshe, the one that says that the people of the smaller city cannot carry through the entirety of the larger city, Lemishtabish, is also not a mistake. The Malkim Labamoidi, it's talking about somebody's measuring from his hometown 2,000 amma, and it ends in the midst of that city, and therefore, and it's missing in the text of the Brisa is missing. This is what it means to say. The people of the smaller city, of the larger city, can walk the entirety of the small city. And the people of the larger city, of the smaller city, cannot walk the entirety of the larger city. And when is that said? If they're measuring from their home, and it ends in the middle of the larger city, they can't walk through the entirety. They can only go until where 2,000 amma ends. However, the larger cities, 2,000 amma encompasses this small city, and therefore they can carry throughout the whole thing. But if somebody lives in the larger city, but put his eruv, means he put a bread in the smaller city and made that his hometown, or vice versa, or he lives in the smaller city, but he made his eruv in the larger city. There, he's not walking throughout the entirety of the larger city or the entirety of the smaller city on account of it being within the 2,000 amma of his space, but rather because he made that his space for Shabbos. He can go the entirety of that city because he put the eruv in that city, and so the entirety of that city counts as 4 amma, meaning it doesn't count as a part of his 2,000 amma, it's his space, and he can go the outside of that city, 2,000 amma in each direction. And he can go 2,000 amma outside that city in every way, just like anybody who put an eruv out. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rami Barabba, Amar Rav Huna. Rav Yosef said in the name of Rav Huna, if you have a town, a city, Ir, Sheyesheves al Svas Anachal, that on one border of the city, it actually comes up to a river. Im yesh lefanei daka, if it has a wall. Typically we said earlier, a daka is a 4 tefachim, about 12, 15 inches of a ledge or a doorway, or like this opening at the end of the ladder path and the cul-de-sac, which we talked about earlier. Here, this daka is going to be arba. It's going to be a wall along the length of the city, along the river, at 4 amos high. So if you have this wall, that's the way Rashi learns this, it's a wall, sort of like whether a retaining wall or a protective fence from the river, as long as it's 4 amos high, which is about 6 feet high to the length of that river. So then we say that the entire the town, the village, the city is going to end at the banks of the river, at that wall, and your 2,000 amma begins at the wall, and so you can make it across the river if it's not 2,000 amma, which is about 3,000 feet wide, and you can continue on the other side. The imlav, however, if it does not have such a wall, so then you cannot count, since it's open on that side of the city to the river. Each individual household has to measure from their doorway, and it doesn't count as a city. It counts as individual homes because it's exposed to the river. It doesn't have anything protecting it from the river, and so each individual home is going to count as its own, like we saw with the nomadic huts. So to over here in this village, and everybody counts the 2,000 amma from their home itself. Amalei Abaye.
The Daka is 4 amos high.
Yes, and the length of the city.
So I mean, so it's like Choma Sa'ir, right?
Only that it's not. It's only on the riverside.
It's only on the riverside.
Yeah. Tessus has a different interpretation.
Just look at the picture. It's got mechitzas, but it's also got a pirza there.
Sorry.
Just looking at the picture, the illustration that you put up there, it's got mechitzas all around.
No, these are buildings.
But I mean, don't they form a mechitza?
Yeah, but they're not. But it's not actually Chomas Ha'ir. It's not the wall of the city. And that's just their standard picture. It doesn't. If there are a bunch of houses, the halacha would be the same. The idea is that there's a wall along the river, and that makes it into a city because it has a protective wall from the river. That's when it's going to count as a village. Otherwise, each house is separate. So Abaye challenged. Daka arba amas amaslan. You're telling us that this is a 4 amma wall high, and you call it a daka. Why is it different than all the other daka which we spoke about, which is really a small wall, just a ledge? The arba, which is 4 tfachim, which is about 12-15 inches. Amalei hasam le be'isa tashmishta, hacha be'isa tashmishta. The difference is here it's needed, since it needs its usage. Amar Rav Yosef, Mina Minilo. Rav Yosef said, how do I know this, that it needs this 4 amma wall? The Tani we learned. Hitter Rebbe permitted for Hitter Rebbe Shebnei Geder Yerde Lachamsen. There were 2 villages that were on a hillside or a mountain. Geder and Chamsen. Geder lived higher up, and Chamsen lived lower down on the side of the hill. And Rebbe allowed for the people of Geder to come down to the people of Chamsen on Shabbos. But he did not allow the people of Chamsen to come up to the place called Geder. My time. Now, what was the reason that there was a distinction that Geder could come down to Chamsen and Chamsen could go down together, cannot go up together? Wouldn't you say that they were both on some riverside, a stream, and Chamsen had not made this barrier between the river and the village, and therefore each person had to count from his household, and so only maybe the one end would get together, whereas the Geder had such a daka, such a fence, such a wall, and for them they were able to go down to the other village because they can count from the daka itself. Ki asar Rav Dimi, however, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, remember that Rav Dimi would travel from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel and back to bring the teachings of each one of the yeshivas to the other. So when he came, he said, actually, the scenario was something entirely different. Amar tatrugi metatragi lehu b'nei Geder b'nei Chamsen. B'nei Geder, the people from the village of Geder, would abuse, they would beat, and they were bullies, and they would beat and sometimes even kill people from Chamsen. And the people of Chamsen were afraid of the people of Geder, and would, if they ever traveled in together, it was dangerous for them. So my hitir hiskin, what does it mean that he permitted? He didn't permit. He made it a custom that the people of Geder every Shabbos would go to Chamsen, on Maishna Shabbos, and why on Shabbos did he not allow the people from Chamson to go together? Because on during the week they would all be working, but on Shabbos they wouldn't be working, so they would drink, and they would drink a little heavily and gather. And since they had this animus and they were bullies to the people of Chamson, if people from Chamson came on Shabbos together, it was dangerous. So Rebbe established that the people of Geder would go to Chamson. Well, then they would bully them even in Chamson. It says the Gemara says Kalba b'lei masa shav shnin alei nabach. No, a dog when it's not in its environment, it doesn't bark even for 7 years. It's a phrase, a saying that a bully when he's outside of his environment is calmer. You bring him together with his friends, and then it's dangerous. So the people of Geder would be allowed to go to Chamson. That was an enactment. They should, but the people of Chamson should not go together because it was dangerous. So Gemara says, Hashanami metatragi b'nei Chamson b'nei Geder. Well, if it's based on whose home turf it's on, well, the people of Chamson are going to take advantage of a guest from Geder and beat him up. So kulahai lekaifilu. No, the people of Geder were stronger than the people of Chamson, that they had them fearing them. They wouldn't really bother them if they were out of their home. The Geder was out of their home turf, but the people of Chamson did not take advantage of the people of Geder either. So this had nothing to do with the halachas of Eruv. This really had something to do with, according to this Rav Dimi's retelling of the story, it had to do with of one city abusing the other. However, Rav Safra said, actually, it was a village that was made like an arch, right? So we saw the halacha earlier that, and we're going to go with Rashi's interpretation, multiple interpretations here. It says Chamson was a city made like an arch, and we saw the halacha that it would have to be that the two ends of this bow, as the Gemara calls it, would have to be within 4,000 amma of each other, because if it's wider than 4,000 amma, so the homes at the two extremes are not within the techum. So for them, they would have to measure their techum from the tip of the arch, from the top, and therefore they were less than 2,000 amma. They were more than 2,000 amma away, and they couldn't reach the village of Geder. However, for the people of Geder, which were a square, they would measure from the end of their city, and they could get to each one of the edges of the village, of the arch-shaped village, and therefore they could enter Chamson, but the people of Chamson cannot go to the village of Geder. Tosfos has different interpretations, a couple interpretations that actually Geder was like an arch, and they could get into the center of the city, but the people of Chamson could only get into the center of the empty space in the arch of the city. Either way, the idea is that the people of Geder could make it while the people of Chamson could not. Rav Dimi bar Chinana Amar, Rav Dimi the son of Rav Chinana says, actually, the case that was going on over here was that one was a larger city, one was a smaller city, as we saw before. And the people of the smaller city can only go partially into the city of the larger city, and not completely beyond. Whereas the people of the larger city can go into the entirety of the smaller city because it's all encompassed in the 2,000 am. Rav Kahana Masni Hachi. That's the way Rav Kahana taught this. Rav Tavyumi Masni Hachi. This is the way Rav Tavyumi taught it. That Rav Safra and Rav Dimi bar Chinana, we don't know who said which. Chad Amar Irasuyuka Keshasavet. One says that the reason that one could travel to the other and the other cannot travel to it, Geder could travel to Chamson and not vice versa, was because one of them was a arch-shaped city and one was a regular square city. And one says no, that this was a larger city aside from a smaller village, and the entirety of the smaller village was within the 2,000 am of the larger city. But the 2,000 amma of the smaller city into the larger city ended pretty much right after it got in, and therefore they couldn't really walk around much of the city, and he didn't let them get there because they would end up going throughout. Now we're up to the Mishnah on Samach Aleph Amid Aleph, the Mishnah which really tells us this halacha that we were just studying. Anshe ir gedola ma'alchan is called ir katana. The people of the larger city can go to the entirety of the smaller city, because the entirety of the smaller city is encompassed in the 2,000 amma outside of their village, outside of their city. Va'anshe ir katana ma'alchan is called ir gedola. And the people of the smaller city can go the entirety of the larger city. And the Mishnah is going to explain what's going on. It has to explain earlier in the Gemara that this, the Mishnah says it here clearly, and this is the way Rav Idi explained it in the Bryce as well. That what's going on is not that you're at home and you're putting and you want to measure from your home to the other city, but rather you put your Eruv in the other city, and then the entirety of the other city counts as your place, and it only counts as 4 amma, so therefore you have 2,000 amma outside of the city. Or Be'ir Katana, or if your home is in the small city, you put your Eruv in the larger city. So you have a right to travel the distance, the entirety of the outside city, and beyond it, 2,000 amma. Amar Rabbi Akiva, however, Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Even if you put your Eruv in another city, wherever your Eruv is your dwelling place for Shabbos, you akana shvisa, that you acquired your Shabbos there. However, since it's not your hometown, all you have is 2,000 amma from your Eruv. Wherever you put your meal, you put your bread, you have 2,000 amma. And even in the same city, you cannot travel the entirety of the city. Rabbi Akiva tried to prove it to them and said, look, don't you agree to me? Wouldn't you say that it's true the same if I put my Eruv in a cave? That all I have within the cave is 2,000 amma from where I put my Eruv? He says, of course, that's true, we'll agree to you, but only if there are no inhabitants, meaning it's not really a livable space. It's not enclosed with fences. Doesn't have 4 walls. But if it has dwelling, meaning it is worthy of living in there, as the Gemara is going to explain, that it has a fence, the halachas kula, that the enclosure will make it such that it counts as 1 4 amma space, your space for Shabbos, and therefore you can walk 2,000 amma from any direction outside of the city. So in this type of thing, a cave, which is enclosed on the inside, but the top of the cave, which would be maybe a hillside or a mountain, whatever it is, that would not have an enclosure. Inside the cave counts as 4 amma, and I can travel 2,000 amma outside of it in any direction. Whereas on top of that cave, if I made my Eruv right above it, on the ground above, I would only be allowed to go 2,000 amma from the place itself. And if somebody's in his hometown and wants to measure from his place 2,000 amma, all you have is 2,000 amma. Even if it ends in the midst of a cave, you cannot go the entirety of the cave. It ends wherever it ends, and that's where you have a right to go. And this what Rav Idi said earlier was it was surprising that there would be a distinction of another city at the being entirely encompassed versus not entirely encompassed. But over here we saw that the cave, wherever your 2,000 amma ends outside the city, even if it's in an enclosed area, you can only go to where that ends. So now we go to Samach Aleph on the base. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mashmur. Shavas be'ir chareva. He put his Eruv in a city. However, the city is now desolate. It's a ghost town. It still has, it's built up. It still has its walls. However, nobody lives there anymore. Nevertheless, l'Rabbanan mahalachas kula v'chutza la'apayim amma. You can walk the entirety of that city because it's enclosed, and therefore you can go 2,000 amma outside of the city. Whereas according to Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah, you can only put wherever you put your eruv is 2,000 amma, and that's it. However, he puts his eruv in a broken a city that is a city that's destroyed. It has to have some dwelling. It has to have dwellers there. So all you have is 2,000 amma. So Gemara says, Rabbi Lezer Eimer Echad Shabbos ve'Echad Aniach. It doesn't make a difference whether this is where you dwelt for Shabbos or whether you put an eruv there. Either way, whether you put your bread there or whether you were there at the onset of Shabbos, either way, Mahalchas Kula, you have the entirety of the city. So we have machlokas here. According to the Chachamim, if there's no inhabitants in the city, but it has a fence, if you're there for Shabbos, that's where you made your Kana Shvisa, the entire city counts as yours because it's enclosed. If you put your eruv down, then it's not going to count as your city, and you only have 2,000 amma from wherever it is. And Rabbi Eliezer says no. Everybody that the Chachamim are going to say, regardless of whether you put your eruv there or you dwelt there yourself for Shabbos, since it's enclosed, it doesn't make a difference that there is no one that's living there now. It's enclosed. You have the entirety of that enclosure as your space for Shabbos, and then you have 2,000 amma outside of it. Mesaveh. So we ask a contradiction. Amalei Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva said to them, Rabbi Kiva said, don't you agree to me that if I put my eruv, I put my bread inside a cave, all I have is 2,000 amma within the cave, and I don't have the entirety of the cave counting as my space, and then 2,000 amma outside of the cave? And they agreed, and they said, if there's nobody dwelling there, that means that they agreed that if there's no one that lives in the cave, that you don't have the entirety of the cave. So the Gemara explains, it doesn't have an enclosure. All the walls have collapsed, and it's not worthy of dwelling. That's what it means. There's no dwelling. But if it's actually an enclosed cave, a safe place to dwell for Shabbos, so indeed the entirety of that space is going to be one space of Dalet Almas, and you have 2,000 amma outside of it. Tashema. So come in here. Let's try and prove this halacha. Shavas be'ir afilihi gedola kantuchia. Somebody dwells for Shabbos in a village or a city or a town or a large city like Antuchia, b'ma'ara, or in a cave. Even if it's like the cave of Tzidkiyahu. The cave of Tzidkiyahu was this long underground tunnel from the king's palace outside of the city to escape the city, and he tried to escape that way from the Nebuchadnezzar's army, from the Babylonian troops, and unfortunately was caught as he was coming out of the cave. So, but this was a large cave. So even if it's as large as the cave of Tzidkiyahu, he can go the entirety of this large city or the entirety of the large cave, and outside of it 2,000 amma. So we see that the cave and the city all count as one large one space as his space because he was there for Shabbos. Ketani ir dumi demara, and we learn a city similar to a cave. Mama ora chareva, afia chareva. Just as the cave is dwellerless, right? So too the city. Now for the city, of course, we're talking about that it has a wall, because otherwise, how are you going to? Why would it count as one large space? Must be that it's still enclosed. However, there's no one living there anymore. It's a ghost town, a desolate city, and that's what it means that it doesn't have dwellers, but it does have the fence around it. V'shavasin, and it's only a count that he was dwelling in there at the onset of Shabbos. But it seems like if he put his meal there, if he put his eruv there, that would not be sufficient. So we see that Rav Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, that said that there's a distinction between whether he was there for Shabbos. Since it's enclosed, he can count it all as one. But if he put his eruv there, he just has 2,000 amma from the eruv. It seems like that distinction is made in this brisa as well, because it compares a cave to a city, meaning that there are no dwellers there, but it is an enclosed space. And it says specifically, if he was there for Shabbos, meaning he dwelt there for Shabbos, at the onset of Shabbos, he was actually there, that counts as a space. But if he wasn't there, he just put his bread there to make it his space, but he wasn't actually physically there, then he only has 2,000 amma from his bread, from his meal. Now, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Akiva. Is it Rabbi Akiva's opinion? So why would he say specifically like a cave and a city or a village that doesn't have inhabitants? Rabbi Akiva says this is true even if it has inhabitants. When you put your meal down, all you have is 2,000 amma from the meal, regardless of where you put it. In the middle of Portland, you put down a meal. If that's not within your home tchum, all you have is 2,000 amma from the meal. Elalav Rabbanan. So it must be this is the opinion of the Rabbanan. And the Rabbanan, even the Rabbanan will say that if it's an enclosed space, you're going to have 2,000 amma outside of it. It's only true if there are dwellers there. Time of the Shabbos in. But if you it's only not if there are dwellers there. If he dwelt there before Shabbos. But if he put his meal down, but if all he did was he put his meal down, he wasn't in this enclosure, in this city. At the onset of Shabbos, he only put a meal. Since there are no dwellers there, he doesn't get the entirety of the space. So the Gemara says, don't tell me that the city is like the cave. And just like the cave doesn't have dwellers, so too the city doesn't have dwellers. And no, it's the other way around. Maybe it's the other way around, that the cave is like the city. Antuchia was a large city and that's what the brisa used as an example. It was a large city and it had many dwellers and many inhabitants. So Dumya the Ir Ma'ir Yesheva, Ma'ar Yesheva. Just as the city has dwellers, so too the cave also has inhabitants that live there. Rabbi Akiva. And the Mishnah is, and this brisa is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, that if you put down a bread, all you have is 2,000 amma from where you put your meal. It's only if you're specifically there at the onset of Shabbos, you made this your space for Shabbos, so then it's your city, and you have 2,000 amma from outside of it. And he agrees that if you actually dwell in there, so then you have the entirety of the city. The Gemara says, wait, but we said it's like the cave of Tzidkiyahu, and the cave of Tzidkiyahu did not have inhabitants. So Kamara Tzidkiyahu, like Kamara Tzidkiyahu. Well, yes, in one way, it was only comparing to Tzidkiyahu in one manner. Kamara Tzidkiyahu Gedola, to tell you that it was large like the village of, like the cave of Tzidkiyahu. V'lo Kamara Tzidkiyahu, but not entirely like that cave. The Ilu Hasam Chareva, because there obviously there was no one living in the underground tunnels. The cave of Tzidkiyahu, that was his escape route. Vahacha Yesheva. Our case is that it actually has dwellers. Mar Yehuda Ashkechinu lebnei Mavrachta. Mar Yehuda met the people of Mavrachta. The Kamoisav Eruvayu, they were putting their Eruv, the Beit Knishta, the Beit Agbe. They were putting their Eruv in the shul of a neighboring town called Agubar. Amalu, he said to them, he said, go even deeper into the city so that you get more space. Because if you put it so close by the shul, which is just at the beginning of the city, you're going to only have 2,000 amma into the city from the shul. Go more to the center of the city, and this way you have a larger area of the city